Hi, I'm Kyle. I made those writing videos where I complained a lot about the Fallout show and occasionally gave advice on narrative storytelling. Also, civilization sketches at one point. I regenerated recently, but everything's good. It's only my third time. I've made a couple of unflattering references to anime in past videos, thinking that most anime fans would be self-confident enough to find humor in accurate generalizations. I don't know why. And while I don't take back any of the things that I've said, I also misrepresented my full opinion. So, it's time I stopped pretending and admitted in a public forum I like anime. I've gone through phases. When I was a child, I became so obsessed with Pokemon that my parents had to limit my total weekly watch time because I would not stop talking about it. When I was in middle school, I was introduced to the Fruits Basket series and the concept of reading from right to left. Unfortunately, I was also introduced to bullies around the same time, and so I decided I didn't really enjoy it as much as I thought I did. Then, after high school, I made the very adult decision to not like anime at all because it was too silly and weird.
Oh crap! Pokeroon! He's gotta use the bathroom! If something's blocking my view of him, I can't keep a lid on his curse!
Watch.
I am not watching him do his business!
In general, I didn't like how poorly paced most anime was, I didn't like how whiny and pathetic most of the protagonists were, and I did not like how women tended to be depicted. But one day, some friends of mine convinced me to try this little indie series called
Full Metal Alchemist.
Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood drew me in with a fully realized magic system and a story with such a tight plot that the first episode literally is a foreshadowing device for the villain's final plan. The characters actually sound and act appropriate to their age, the women are awesome, there are no flashbacks to things that happen earlier in the same episode, and I don't have to listen to the protagonist's internal self-hatred monologue the entire time. I ended up watching the last 2 seasons in a single sitting because I just couldn't stop, and also because it was COVID and I didn't have anything else to do. Next, I was introduced to Attack on Titan, and I was once again blown away with the story's pacing, the slowly building mystery, and the jaw-dropping moments of payoff that seemed somehow more exciting than anything should ever be able to be. I was so glued to the screen I had to force myself to stop and go to bed on a daily basis. But those were obviously exceptions to the rule, so I continued resisting until my wife finally forced me to try My Hero Academia for like the 4th time. Season 1 of this show had literally every problem I mentioned. Izuku Midoriya is a whiny baby. They re-show the same scenes of Midoriya being a whiny baby over and over again. The women cover the full suite of anime stereotypes, including comically underdressed high school student, dominatrix who spends way too much time around children, and mom. And there's this guy. I watched along and made fun of this dumb show for 2 whole seasons, and then something happened. The longer I watched, the harder it was to ignore the truth. I was becoming invested, and every day, more and more, I could think only him. Somehow, I became as big a fan of All Might as the whiny baby himself. I want to be All Might so bad. I trust everything he says. I admire everything he does. He makes me believe there is hope in this world. And it occurred to me that what All Might does for his in-universe fans, anime somehow does for the audience. And that is fucking ridiculous. In my adult life, nothing has reignited my belief that I can achieve true greatness more than anime, and I need to understand why, so I can explain it to my parents without feeling like such a disappointment. I'll admit it, I was too hard on anime. I was in denial about how much I liked it. As a medium, it can accomplish things that no other medium could, no matter how hard they tried, unless they're RRR. Is it a breeding ground for grossly inhuman depictions of women that satisfies only the most sexually repressed men? Also yes. But sometimes it's not. Regardless, it consistently utilizes the build-up and payoff of true drama to a level of satisfaction unseen in other mediums. It rides the now famous danger diagonal so perfectly that you can't help but come back for the next episode. When it comes to establishing stakes and paying off expectations, it leaves American superhero films and HBO dramas in the dust. Anime is raw emotion. The flashbacks, the facial expressions, the JoJo poses. I've never watched JoJo, I do not endorse JoJo. It's all working together to put you into the experience of the character, establish a set of rules, give you hope that you could break those rules, and then allow that hope to manifest in a superhuman feat of pure determination. This is not just drama. This is hype. We all know what it's like to feel hyped. It's what made us go to the theater 5 times a year to see another Marvel superhero fight their evil clone in an epic sky battle. again. It's what makes sports ball fans set their hometowns on fire. It's why Vince McMahon exists. There's obviously a kind of excitement that can come from the strength of a story's writing when a great show ends on a cliffhanger and we're anxious to see the next season because we want to see the character arcs resolved. That's not what I'm talking about. Hype is more visceral. It exists in a liminal space between the groundless thrill of riding a roller coaster and the refined pleasure of finishing a great novel. It appeals to our lowest instincts and our highest aspirations. It's also not new or unique to anime. It's a tool that's been used since the early days of Western spectator sports to draw in crowds and later to sell comic books and summer blockbusters. It's an effective marketing tool, but as a writer, hype is also one of the greatest tools at your disposal to create moments people will remember forever. And anime is an excellent way to study how it works. It's very easy to make fun of anime, but honestly, there are plenty of really well-made shows that don't have any of the issues I've talked about. In fact, I've come so far that I can now say my favorite show is an anime. I found Frieren last year, and I cannot express how much this story was tailor-made for me. It truly reminds me what it felt like to watch Lord of the Rings for the first time, and the main character's journey feels painfully and cathartically relatable. It follows Frieren, an ancient elf who was once a member of the Heroes Party, like from a standard D&D adventure, and how she navigates her life after they've all passed away. We watch her travel through a collection of serialized, one-off adventures with a new party as she re-explores what turned out to be a pretty significant time of her life through the lens of hindsight, and tries to learn more about the friends she neglected to get to know in the moment. It's probably my first actual comfort show since watching Doctor Who in my early 20s, which... Wait, are these just the same show? I think what makes Frieren and Doctor Who stick out, and what made them such a great comfort for me, is how they could flip between the most mundane and the most epic moments, all stemming from one simple premise. Frieren will cover months of walking and sleeping and cleaning stuff and collecting plants, and then walking and sleeping some more, and then you blink, and she's murdering a demon general with 2 words and pure aura.
Kill yourself.
But that's just Thursday, and then she's back to planting flowers and napping in the back of a cart, because she's already saved the world. Unlike your Dragon Balls or your My Heroes, there's never any question of whether or not she's gonna win. She just will. She's basically a god. It's not even gonna be fair. Same with the Doctor. There's never any actual threat of him dying, because then the show would end. So they both take their time, seemingly doing nothing of any importance until they stumble into somebody else's problem. But then, in those moments, you're suddenly reminded how awesome they are. There's not a lot of obvious build-up, just the steady knowledge that when the hero arrives, they will succeed. It's only a question of how. So with that in mind, what exactly is hype? It clearly describes these moments that are, to put it simply, sick as fuck. But it's not as simple as just making Batman fight Superman or yelling so loud that your hair changes color, because sometimes those moments can fall completely flat and feel like nothing but noise. But sometimes they can be such transcendent, defining moments of your actual real life that they form core memories. They can make you feel new emotions for the first time. They can turn great stories into immortal ones because of how well they pay off the themes and expectations we've become so invested in. Is it possible that what I'm trying to describe here is just good quality writing? Unfortunately, no. Hype moments are a payoff. Something has been building up, and that big, awesome scene is a release. But without any substance behind it, that release moment is meaningless and usually kinda lame, and it happens all the time. Hype has a bad reputation because we're most familiar with it as a marketing tool. Reality TV ads, wrestling promos, and action movie trailers all use the same cheap tricks over and over again to try and get you excited for something you've never really cared about. It strikes us as desperate and needy, like Stranger Things characters appearing in a State Farm ad. But it's not just commercials where it can go wrong. We've seen actual narrative storytelling attempt to pay off hype with no substance to support the emotion they're trying to make you feel. And you'd think it would be incredibly obvious, but it's shocking how many of these hollow TV shows get praised and defended just because of their implied depth. Spotting it can be tricky because instead of a baseless promise, it's a delivery on a promise the writer never made in the first place. You can say a lot of bad things about Arcane Season 2, and I most certainly have, but one thing I can say about it is that it is filled to the brim with moments of hype. I say there are 2, maybe 3 jaw-dropping, gut-punching 21 Pilots music videos per episode. Taking notes from the first season, they use every trick in the book to deliver an emotional finale to whatever point they maybe introduced 1 or 2 scenes ago. The animation is stunning, the songs are emotional, and by episode 3, you can't even remember all the reasons you aren't invested in anything that's going on. I didn't say it was a good thing. Let's look specifically at the Jinx and Savika team-up fight, one of many things I just didn't have time to cover in the other video. What's so frustrating about this scene is that it should have been awesome, but it's paying off and setting up absolutely nothing. Both Jinx and Savika fully relied on Silco in season 1 and competed for his favor. After his death, there's certainly an opportunity for their relationship to change. Their goals could align and an uncomfortable alliance could form, which would then easily lead to more drama when Savika discovers that Jinx is the one who killed Silco. Unfortunately, none of that happens. Instead, we suddenly get this cool, stylized fight scene where Jinx has apparently built Savika a new arm, and they work together to defeat these random thugs who were introduced earlier this same episode, and then they never interact again. It's just a random moment of a story that could have been.
What we could have been.
And this is just the whole season. Animated concept art for theoretical story arcs that could have the depth and nuance of season 1 if they'd just taken the time to let us get invested before they tore our attention away to introduce the next thing. Because all they cared about was creating those moments of hype. They saw the TikTok edits of season 1, and instead of prioritizing a story that would inspire more of those, they tried to manufacture them by just creating as many cool looking moments as possible. They thought that if they forced enough hype, they wouldn't need to write a story because everybody liked season 1 enough that they would just eat it up anyway. Well, turns out they were absolutely right. That worked. But I think it only worked because season 1 was so good. Short term, hype is effective, regardless of actual immediate substance. The highest grossing film of all time is Avatar. When that movie came out, it was a cultural event. Everyone I knew was telling me how incredible it was. My whole family went to see it. It was in 3D. The people were blue. It was like a holiday, or like watching the first movie ever made. And it was incredible. And then everybody basically forgot about it. It wasn't bad, but the content wasn't important compared to how the experience felt. So hype can exist without quality narrative. The catch is just that it can really only do that one time. Over 10 years later, we finally have more James Cameron Avatar movies, and I've heard they're fine. The mechanic at play here is clearly that hype needs something to burn. There has to be some kind of fuel for the fire, or it just sparks and dies. The key to understanding and igniting hype, then, is in figuring out that fuel source. Let's take a look at Marvel movies, since we can never not look at Marvel movies. The fact that I can say post-Endgame MCU, and you know exactly what I'm talking about, speaks to the current state of the franchise, I think. Marvel has had incredibly successful moments of hype in the past. The first Avengers movie, Spider-Man finally arriving on screen, the final battle with Thanos when everybody comes through the portal. Sure, those scenes looked cool, but what we remember is how they felt. The energy in the room during the revelation of this event we didn't think was even possible. And after Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home, which was also awesome, I maintained hope that those feelings would stay. The moment I realized I had stopped caring was in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. Yay! It's those guys. And I just remember being in the theater and feeling incredibly detached. I had no investment in anything that was happening on screen. It was just neat, like somebody's really impressive VFX final. Multiverse of Madness tries to have an underlying theme about Doctor Strange and the choices he's made, and so he's facing off against an evil version of himself, which seems like an appropriate way to wrap up that story, but like, I don't even know this guy like that. At this point, he's had one other movie entirely to himself, and then he's been kind of a judgmental assistant in everybody else's stories. Tony Stark is on a clear, consistent journey every time he's on screen. We're watching him actively struggle with his guilt and responsibility, not just because he has the power to help people, but because he caused the problems in the first place. There's always a question of whether or not he'll manage to stay ahead of his own failures. So when he flies a rocket into space, risking his own life to save Earth, that means something. Stephen Strange, on the other hand, has basically always been content with exactly who he is. He's not acting out of anything other than obligation. Even the evil versions of himself just do the same things he already does. They get too confident and access some universe-destroying magic, so he has to stop them by also accessing some universe-destroying magic. Basically, just me from self-fulfilling idiocy. So as cool as this fight scene is, there's just nothing deeper to be invested in. We have no expectations of how this might go or what it might mean for the larger story. There's no fuel to burn, but they try to spark the fire anyway, and it just doesn't catch. All successful hype needs fuel. Arcane Season 2 had Season 1, the original Avengers had 3 different movie franchises, even cool TikTok edits have source material that you already know and love. So even if it's coming from outside of the story you're currently watching, hype can't exist completely devoid of quality narrative storytelling. And does it even matter at that point? Unfortunately, yes! Everyone knows that true art in film comes from subtlety and nuance. Hype is the unrefined tool of the carnival sideshow, but true drama is about establishing a narrative expectation, building tension through thematic conflict, and then resolving that conflict in a meaningful climax that stirs your audience's emotions. And that may sound like the exact same thing that I said hype was, In a previous video, we defined drama versus mystery as inverse writing tools. Mystery is giving your audience a question, but no answer, implicitly promising an answer later on. It can really elevate your story, but it's very easy to misuse. Drama, on the other hand, is giving your audience an answer and promising the question. It's telling people your story ends with Romeo and Juliet killing themselves, and then telling them that story. It's infinitely more intriguing, and it's the foundation of storytelling. Hype is when you do both. Quality writing without drama is a scientific paper. It's a history documentary that your dad is watching at 4 p.m. on a Sunday. It's that movie Boyhood about the boy getting older. And like, that's it. Like, I get it, you filmed it for 12 years, you still gotta make it a good movie. Drama is the basic engine of storytelling. Even Aesop's fables have dramatic momentum. The tortoise and the hare really keeps you on your toes. And in a lot of ways, hype and drama overlap. But hype is bigger. Drama is entirely encapsulated by the narrative, but hype is about your expectations regardless of whether or not the writer has promised you anything. It's about how your own mind fills in the gaps, and as the writer, you have the power and responsibility to direct and fulfill those expectations. In season 3 of New Doctor Who with David Tennant, there's an episode where he uses a Time Lord pocket watch to fully turn himself human in order to hide from aliens who are tracking him. It erases all his memories, and his entire Time Lord essence is stored in the watch. Later, the aliens catch up anyway, and he's unprepared, and there are shenanigans, and it's all somehow very sad. It's an incredible two-parter episode, and it teaches us something new about the now extinct Time Lords and the possibilities of this universe. It's not overtly a setup for anything. All of Doctor Who is serialized, so we have every reason to never expect to see that pocket watch again. But then, in the last episode of the season, the Doctor visits a small settlement at the end of the universe and tries to help this scientist finish a rocket so his people can try to escape. It's all seemingly just another adventure until the Doctor's companion Martha learns that this irrelevant old scientist has an identical pocket watch, and it's insane. Not only do we know exactly what that means, but it breaks the expectations that we've already established and fulfills a suspicion that's been pulling at the edge of our minds for the entire show. The Doctor is supposedly the last of the Time Lords because they all died in a massive war, but you can't help but wonder, what if he's wrong? He assures us and his companions multiple times that he's the last one, and since he's the authority in the show, there's no promise being made of ever running into another one. And yet, it still feels possible. Like a character dying off screen. We can see that gap, and the more we learn about the world, the clearer that gap becomes until the show finally says, yep, you were right all along. And on top of that, if you were even remotely familiar with the previous run of the show, and you learn that there's one other guy who didn't die in the Time War, you already know exactly who that is. And it all just hits you like a truck you never even saw coming and retroactively makes the whole show even cooler. That is what hype looks like. Narrative can exist without hype. For example, your standard episodic sitcom or crime show utilizes dramatic beats to tell each episode's story. They establish an expectation, build tension, and then give some kind of payoff, but then everything resets. There's never anything left over at the end of a Simpsons episode to contribute to hype later on. Hype can only happen when assumptions and questions are allowed to build up over time, and as a writer, paying that off relies on your ability to recognize, guide, and then deliver on those questions. So can quality exist without hype? I guess technically, kind of. You could have a perfectly well-written, one-off, dull drama with no surprises or larger implications, but dependent on your definition of quality, I don't think anyone would praise it as great writing. Quality storytelling produces hype naturally as a byproduct. It comes from clear, hard boundaries in your world building and character development, and the suggestion that there could be exceptions to those boundaries. When rules are established, we instinctively start to push on them, make our own connections, fill in the gaps, and wonder what it might take to break those rules. And no genre of media is better at creating excessively specific rules than
Go! Recover Aaron from the armored titan and retreat! Your heart and soul to the cause! Advance! Commander Irvin! I said advance, goddammit! Aaron's right in front of you! Do not falter!
So now that we've made it clear what hype is and how it works, how do you use it in your own writing? It's honestly very simple. Step 1, you establish a rule. This is the setup phase, the world building. Americans are afraid of exposition because our film school teachers told us that explaining things was bad, but they also told us Star Wars was the prototype for every movie, and it literally opens with scrolling text explaining what's going on. Anime shows us that exposition is nothing to be afraid of, so do an opening narration, film a whole prologue, explain the sci-fi mechanic to us outright, just tell us the rules. Nobody can get hyped about something that isn't even clear. Every episode of Full Metal Alchemist opens with a description of how the magic system works. Death Note is almost entirely about the mechanics of the Death Note. My Hero Academia isn't even a show about people fighting each other with superpowers, it's about the mechanics of superpowers and the recovery time required after fighting each other with them. They leave no stone unturned, and it's interesting. I want to know how it all works so that when the actual fight is happening, I can understand why it's so cool. This is actually just a basic action movie rule. If a character needs to pull a new ability or weapon out of nowhere in order to win, it cheapens the outcome and kills the momentum of the whole story. It doesn't feel earned if we never knew what was possible in the first place. There are good and bad ways to give your audience this information, but the worst thing you can do is not tell us at all. Step 2, imply the rule can be broken. This doesn't have to be obvious, it can just be a blank space, a silent possibility of an exception, or it can be subtly teased within the story before eventually fully incorporating it. For example, if your characters have the power to control water, does that mean they could also control blood? If Denji fused with the Chainsaw Devil, then the same thing could conceivably happen to someone else. What if Goku's power level could go over 9,000? In My Hero, this happens all the time because the entire show is about exploring the tiniest implications of people's quirks. It's impossible not to wonder what Deku will eventually be able to do at the height of his power, or how much cooler Eraserhead can possibly be. Step 3, build suspense. This is the easiest step. Just don't answer the question for a while. In fact, refute it entirely. Show every reason why the rule is the rule, especially if people already know how the story is going to end. Just make sure you actually know how you're going to break your own rule later so you don't accidentally write yourself into a corner. This is also another basic rule of drama taken to its extreme. You want the odds stacked against your hero so that when they finally win, it's incredible. Like I said before, we already know Frieren is going to win, so the more impossible it seems to defeat the enemy, the more fascinated we are to find out how she's gonna do it. Attack on Titan spends half its first season basically convincing you that humanity is doomed before giving you even the tiniest sliver of hope. And then that punch happens. You can't drag it out too long or you'll lose people, so the trick is to learn exactly how far you can stretch it before that big moment. And that just comes with practice. Finally, step 4, break the rule. Reward the audience's good faith and curiosity whether they see it coming or not. One of the rules established in My Hero is that Midoriya can't use 100% of his power or he'll die. Every time he uses even a little bit of it, he completely obliterates a limb. He's only able to operate at all by learning to release the smallest amount possible across his whole body. At the end of season 4, after extensive training and an exhaustive struggle against the villain Overhaul, we finally get to see Deku take the training wheels off. We've wondered the entire series what it's going to be like for him to max out his power, and because of the cheat code that is this little kid with the horn keeping his body from exploding into atoms, we finally get to see it happen, and they go all out. None of this feels cheap because these pieces have been moving into place for seasons. And honestly, it's about fucking time. Every good anime has these moments because basically every anime over-explains the hell out of its premise and takes forever to deliver on it. The setup for hype is built into the genre, so all the good ones have to do is pull back a little and they tend to land right in the sweet spot. And honestly, Western media could stand to learn a thing or two from their example. It rarely goes wrong. Thor's hammer is this entire strategy condensed into a single prop. The ability to pick it up as a visual representation of how powerful, pure of heart, and heroic somebody is. Only Thor can lift it by default, and even then, only in his best moments. His first movie arc entirely revolves around him becoming worthy enough to wield it again. For a long time, nobody else even comes close to passing the test, but it's hinted that it's not impossible. Then, when Vision is created and everybody is reasonably suspicious of his intentions, he establishes his character instantaneously by casually handing Thor his own hammer. Despite its reputation, hype isn't just a cheap trick. It's really the exact opposite, a way to redefine your character's understanding of your world to make a point. In My Hero, when Deku inherits the strongest power in the world, we still understand that he's the exception, and he has a long way to go before it even matters. In Frieren, we don't roll our eyes because she escapes death yet again, that's just the rule. Instead, we learn more about who she is and how she came to be that way, and it's so cool that we love her even more than we already did. And we continue to wonder what could put her life in danger, and we dread inevitably learning the answer to that question. When hype does fail, it's usually because the writer tries to subvert our expectations and ends up under-delivering so spectacularly that the resulting implosion consumes the entire story leading up to it, like the ending of Game of Thrones or that last fight scene in Twilight that never happened. We almost forget they exist because our brain rejects it like a paradox. But when it succeeds, that's when you make history. So anyway, that's hype. Now, is anime good? That's a whole different question. Rarely, I think. But is it awesome? Hell yeah, it is. Thanks for watching this. For anybody still watching, our viewership tends to drop off at the end of the videos. I think that's probably just normal for video essays. It's been a long time since I've done one of these. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much to CassandrasChaos and Chris for helping me write this. Thank you to Olive for helping me edit. Thank you to Mafek and Backdoor for helping produce, and to Allison for doing all the work of organizing everything. We have a whole team together now making these, and we have more of them coming out. And the plan is to have 2 out next month, and then every month after that. So fingers crossed, I guess. If you enjoy these videos and you're excited to see more, please go check out patreon.com/doormonster. We're running that way better now. There's a whole library full of exclusive content that you can go watch just by signing up on the lowest tier, including my most recent AMA that I did. And we're gonna have new specialized content every month, as well as regularly posted weekly content like a podcast, a short podcast that me and Allison do. We're also gonna bring back community comments, and that's going to be only on Patreon. And if you'd like to see us more regularly, you can go over to OK We're Up on YouTube or Doormonster TV on Twitch. Me and Allison stream 4 days a week in the mornings, and we also have Kate and Matt doing game streams on weekends. We're also looking for sponsors, so if you'd like to sponsor these videos, please hit me up at doormonstertv@gmail.com. That's, I think, the whole list of things, and I'm so tired. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.